A social uprising has taken Cuba by storm. Daylin is one of the reporters working on reporting the news out of Cuba to the world, especially in English, to raise awareness of what is happening in Cuba and what communism is really about. A lot of people have wrong ideas about communism and what it is like to live in a communist society. Daylin will be clarifying the reasons why she decided to defend her own society and what life is like under the communist government in Cuba.
I know there are people, the greatest risk is for the people who are inside Cuba because the consequences are really, really hard for them. It's easier for us who are outside because we don't have the police knocking, on our door trying to take us to a filthy cell and lock us up for doing this right now and speaking. I do understand that there is great risk in speaking out. But I do feel that I'm not alone because there are so many of us who are actually speaking out. And many of us have gained the courage after seeing what the people inside Cuba are actually willing to go through. So my parents risked a lot to be here. So did, a lot of my aunts and uncles and my cousins who came. My husband came on a raft. So it's those things that make you think, man, the risk has already been run. People have already put their lives on the line for freedom. And so I think that it's a responsibility that we have to uphold. And I just feel that my voice needs to be, at this moment, it needs to be right here. And I have gotten quite a bit of backlash. Even some family from Cuba have decided to distance themselves from me. I think I'm a small fish for the Cuban government, but I don't think they're interested in what I have to say really, because there are many people like me out there. What hurts me the most is people that are, dear to me that have decided to distance themselves because they fear for whatever consequences they may suffer due to what I'm saying. Cuba has been under a communist regime for 62 years. And because social media and the internet was not available, Cuba was very closed off. All of a sudden, with the entrance of social media and the internet, people have access to recording things, and that started to happen. People started to record things and send it over to their family members and send it over to media abroad, and certain things have become viral. So certain realities that weren't known of before to the rest of the world are now pretty out there. So having that backup from the international community, Cuban artists have decided to come out and be brave and face the regime and say, we want rights, we want human rights to be implemented here in Cuba. And of course, the regime's response has not been favorable, and they've done everything in their power to suppress them. Right now, there are many activists who are in jail for simply carrying signs of, no more repression on the streets. And those things like that, that's what's happening. Cuba is being starved by a regime that blames everything on, of course, the United States. And having family there, I know how difficult it is for them to get food and appropriate health care. And so those things are making people desperate. And many Cubans are opting to flee, as they have for the past 62 years. But more than ever, Cubans are now gaining the strength and the courage to protest, something that they didn't even see possible years ago, because you automatically get thrown in jail or you get sanctioned. On July 11th, 2021, was historic. That day, so many Cubans went out into the streets organically, and the reason it became viral from one side of the island to the other was because of social media. A neighbor had decided to go out and protest, and they were doing a live video, and through that live stream, other people throughout the island caught that people were on the streets, and they went out on the streets also. And since July 11th, we have had so many demonstrations and so many people protesting, and of course, a lot of them in jail, but that's why we continue from, the exile continues to raise their voice to make sure they don't lose the visibility that they've gained. There is an uprising from the people against the communist regime. So that hasn't happened. That's really never happened to this scale in Cuba. What I started to notice is that the content available was mostly in Spanish, and people here in the US, they wanted to know what was going on in Cuba, but they couldn't understand the content available. So I took it upon myself to start doing more content in English so people could understand what exactly is going on 90 miles from the Florida Keys. So that's basically what I do. I want to mostly explain the truth about communism to the people that don't understand and that still believe that Cuba is a social paradise. A lot of people that I encounter think that Cuba is this ideal place to live in, and I want to make sure that they understand what the truth is. Having lived there till I was 8 years old and having family there still, I know the reality and the challenges of living in a communist country. So I just find it very fulfilling to make sure I educate people on the truth, and so that people become aware and they know why we have so many Cuban rafters throwing themselves to the sea trying to look for freedom. We have, for example, Luis Manuel Otero Alcántara, who is in jail right now. He did a series of photographs about a year ago titled Possible Ways in Which I Could Die. And it was him being photographed in different scenarios where the Cuban estate could kill him, could assassinate him, as they've done in the past. And those were just options that came to his mind. And so he did one where he was hung. He did one where he was overdosed. And it was him in these different positions just to show that the Cuban estate could, harm him, and it wouldn't be him. He was letting the world know, I wouldn't kill myself if anything were to happen to me. And in any of these creative ways they've used before, it would be them that did this to me. So we have that, and we also have a very famous example, which is Patria y Vida, Country and Homeland. And this is a song by five artists from Cuba. This song just won 2 Latin Grammys last month, actually, November. And for Best Song, for Song of the Year, and for Best Urban Song. This song includes 2 rappers from Cuba. One of them is in prison right now. He's in a cell, he's isolated, and he's ill, he's sick. The other one has been exiled, and he's here in Miami. He was able to come into the United States to receive the Grammy. Of course, he's been warned not to go back. But these artists have been openly open protesters against the regime and pro-human rights. So those are 2 examples of how they're using their art and their voice to stand up for human rights and the rest of the Cuban people. Would definitely want to see people be able to express themselves freely without being sanctioned. I would love to see a Cuba where people have free elections to choose their leader, and they haven't had that in over 60 years. Elections where people could say, this is who we want, to represent us. I want my family to be able to have access to the regular things in life, to not be surprised when they see certain types of candy that they've never seen before, or certain types of food. It's stuff that they can only dream of. I want Cubans to be able to have their own cattle and the kids to have milk past 7 years old. I want Cubans to be able to eat without being rationed. And I want Cubans to be able to fish without going to jail because they caught lobster, and lobster is only available for tourists and hotels. I want them to be able to enjoy the place that they were born and enjoy all their rights as human beings.
Many people who Daylin communicates with have different ideas about what communist means and how a life under a communist system looks like. Daylin sees this totally different. Let's listen to Daylin clarify and explain how these ideas are really different from what is happening in Cuba.
A lot of people say to me, well, Cuba has excellent health care and it's free. And it also has free higher education. It has many doctors, and they send their doctors out on missions to the world, and when you hear that, it sounds amazing. However, when you actually analyze the reality and the details of that, you know that the doctors do go out to different missions, but the government charges hundreds of dollars contracts to the countries where the doctors go. But the doctors, once they get there, their documentation is removed, their passports are removed, they're kept in cells and in different quarters that are isolated from everybody else. They can't really they don't have freedom of movement to socialize with the locals. They get a very little percentage of what the government gets for their work, and they're really sent there to spew propaganda about communism. So the doctors are there, and they have people supervising them, making sure that they are saying, that they're promoting candidates in that country that are sympathizers with the Cuban government. So the doctors are sent basically on political missions disguised as medical missions. Healthcare is amazing if you're a tourist. So I do understand that tourists have an amazing experience when they go to Cuba to get treated. But the hospitals that I have taken my mother-in-law to are a completely different story. They are filthy. They don't have any resources. The pharmacies are empty. And people are dying because they don't have antibiotics to treat the simplest things. So when people say Cuba is a paradise, why do Cubans complain? It's because they really have the tourist perspective, and they think Cuba is just Cuban cigars and salsa and old classic vintage cars. The reality is way deeper, and it just takes speaking to someone that's actually from there to realize that it goes way beyond what the propaganda sells to tourists. Cuba is basically one people, except the government and the higher government officials have privileges, of course. There are people that are in certain levels of government that are not really high up, and they do get privileges, but those privileges, they are basically extra food rations. They could maybe travel to Haiti or Guyana or another country to do, shopping and bring stuff back to sell in Cuba. The privileges they have are not in comparison to what you would consider a stature, they're very basic things. So because the misery is so bad, when you get an extra food ration, you consider that a privilege. So, and we don't really have social classes in Cuba. We don't. We do, but it's the government and their families and the people that really just sympathize strictly with them and at that level. Because like I said, some people in government at lower levels, just like everybody else. In Cuba, food is rationed, and you get a card that has the basic things that you're going to need to survive, like rice, oil, eggs, flour. Now, the rations are depending on your needs and your age. So if you're elderly and you may need protein, you have probably meat included, and you have milk also included. But if you're a child, after 7, you don't get any milk. It's not included in your rations anymore. You get 5 eggs per month, and this is all making sure that these things are available. So if it's not available, you just don't get it. You have to wait until next time. Food is also available outside of the rations for euros. Dollars are no longer circulating in Cuba, but with foreign currency, you can get food, really high prices, but you would have to have your family send you money from outside, and then you can go to these stores and find whatever you can if you run out of your food with, from the rations. If you don't have any family outside of Cuba, a lot of people do starve.
Spreading the correct information about Cuba and debunking wrong ideas and wrong beliefs about what's happening there is Daylin's main aim. Due to the lack of correct input and correct information about Cuba, Daylin took upon her shoulders the responsibility to start her own platform and spread the correct information. Let us see why she thinks raising awareness worldwide is so important for her cause.
I just think raising awareness is important. There are many people who are suffering just for the simple fact of saying, I want to be able to say what I want. I want to be able to worship, who I want. I want to be able to eat what I want. I want to travel within my own country and not be sanctioned. So a lot of Cubans don't even know the hotels inside their cities because they're not allowed in. Only tourists are allowed. And that's sad. So I just think that it's important for the word to get out. And I thank you for allowing me to speak on it. And that's basically it. Just people ask, how can I help? And I think the best way to help is just be informed and share the information. Because I couldn't allow people to talk to me and say something that I know to be completely different. I felt very insulted when people, argued. People that had never been to Cuba, not even as tourists, would argue with me about how things were in Cuba, or how things are in Cuba. And I just felt responsible for making sure the truth gets out there in a clear manner, without too much passion, without too much sentiment, just in a clear, concise manner, because I think we need more of that. We need more education. Also because I live in the United States now, and this is my home and this is my children's home. And I want to make sure that everybody around me knows that communism isn't something that was a good experience for me and for the people where I come from. So think twice before you ask for that system to be implemented here. I want to make sure people are educated fully in what communism has meant for Cuba. So in the future, they know better. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want my kids to know better. I want to make sure that my generation knows better. And it's our responsibility to do it. I just wouldn't feel good. It wouldn't feel right to keep silent.
We have seen how Daylin is making use of the available social media platforms and the internet to be able to help her own people. How much do you think social media can relay the right information and help people improve their lives?